The dining room was bright, filled with warm lights and soft music. Crystal glasses clinked. Silverware tapped against porcelain. Laughter echoed off the high walls. The Miller family sat around a long, polished table, dressed for the evening, wine in hand. Amaka sat quietly beside her husband. She wore a soft blue dress. Her hair was tied back neatly. Her hands rested in her lap, one thumb slowly circling the other. She had barely spoken all evening. Daniel leaned toward her with a tight smile. No one else seemed to notice. "Please don't speak too much tonight," he whispered. "You know how your accent comes off." The words landed like a slap. A moment later, he raised his glass. "To family," he said loudly. Everyone lifted their glasses. Chloe giggled. "Cheers to surviving another one of Mom's famous roasts," she said, smirking. Joan, Daniel's mother, sat proudly at the head of the table. Her pearls caught the light. "Well, I do what I can," she said. Her eyes skimmed over Amaka, then away, like she was part of the furniture. Amaka smiled politely, but her lips were tight. She said nothing. Her eyes dropped to her plate. The food was American with a fancy twist. Rosemary lamb, buttered asparagus, tiny squares of potato gratin. Not one dish reminded Amaka of home. Chloe reached for a bowl of rice. "Is this supposed to be jollof or something?" she asked, laughing. "I tried Nigerian food once. My mouth was on fire for days." Daniel laughed. "Yeah, Amaka's mom used to make that kind of stuff. Strong flavors." Amaka's jaw tensed. She remembered her mother's kitchen, filled with music, smoke, and bold colors. Her mother never apologized for flavor. "Anyway," Joan said, "Amaka, you're very quiet tonight. You never say much at these things." Amaka looked up slowly. Her smile returned, but her eyes had darkened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at Daniel. He wasn't paying attention anymore. He was laughing at something Chloe said. Under the table, Amaka's fists were clenched tight in her lap. Her nails dug into her palms. She took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was calm, clear. "I didn't say much," she began, "because I was told not to." The room went still. Daniel turned. "Amaka." She raised a hand, gently but firmly. "No. You said it. Just now. You told me not to speak too much tonight. Because of my accent." Joan blinked. "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way." "But he did," Amaka said, eyes never leaving Daniel's face. And everyone laughed, like it was nothing. No one spoke. Even Chloe's smirk had vanished. Amaka placed her napkin slowly on the table. Her voice didn't rise, but it shook slightly with emotion. "This accent," she said, "comes from a country. A place where my mother taught me to speak with pride. Where my words were strong and full of meaning. Here, it becomes a joke." Daniel shifted in his seat. "Amaka, we don't have to do this." She kept going. "I sit at this table. I listen to jokes about my food, my voice, my silence. And still, I try to belong." Her hands were now on the table, open and steady. "I am not too quiet. I am not too much. I am exactly enough." She stood slowly. The room was frozen. "I will not apologize for being who I am," she said softly. Then she walked out, her steps slow but firm. Behind her, no one laughed. Amaka was born in Enugu, Nigeria. She grew up in a small but happy home with her mother, who was a schoolteacher. Her mother, Mrs. Akanum, was wise, gentle, and strong. She always told Amaka, "Never shrink yourself for anyone. Let your voice be heard." Amaka believed her. She studied hard, loved books, and dreamed of doing something big with her life. In school, Amaka was one of the top students. She gave speeches during school events. People listened when she spoke. She was full of confidence, full of light. Her mother clapped the loudest at every event. "You were born to lead," she'd say. But when Amaka was in her final year of university, her mother got sick. She passed away just a few months before graduation. Amaka was heartbroken, but she pushed through. She finished school and got accepted into a graduate program in the United States. Moving to America was hard at first. Everything was different: the weather, the people, the food. Sometimes, people didn't understand her accent. They asked her to repeat herself. Some laughed, but she kept going. She was focused. She had come to study, to build a new life. Then she met Daniel. He was in one of her classes. Tall, well-spoken, with an easy smile. He noticed her right away. Called her graceful, smart, and refreshing. He opened doors, pulled out chairs, sent her sweet messages. It felt like something from a movie. At first, it was beautiful. He said he admired her strength, loved how she carried her culture with pride. He told her he'd never met someone like her before. They went on dates. He introduced her to his friends. After a year, they got married. But slowly, things began to change. Daniel started correcting the way she spoke. "Don't say it like that," he'd whisper at parties. "Try to sound more neutral." He said he was just helping her fit in. Amaka began to quiet herself. She stopped correcting people when they mispronounced her name. She stopped bringing Nigerian food to work. She started dressing more like Daniel wanted, neat, plain American. She got a job after grad school, but it wasn't what she really wanted. She had dreams of becoming a licensed therapist, like she studied for. But Daniel said it would take too long, that it wasn't practical, right now. So, she took a lower job at his company instead, handling office tasks, staying out of the spotlight. At family events, Daniel's mother, Joan, made little comments. "You're so reserved. Do you ever lead conversations? You're lucky Daniel is patient. Some men wouldn't understand such strong accent." Amaka would smile, say nothing. Daniel never defended her. Chloe, Daniel's sister, liked to poke fun at Amaka's cooking. "Spicy enough to kill a person," she'd laugh. "Bet your kitchen back home didn't have air conditioning." Every time, Amaka stayed silent. She didn't want to cause problems. She told herself to be strong. But little by little, she began to feel smaller. Like her voice didn't matter. She had no close friends nearby. She missed home. She missed her mother. She often thought of how proud her mother used to be of her. Now, she barely recognized herself. At home, Daniel made all the decisions. What they watched, where they went, how they spent money. He said things like, "Let me handle it, you don't have to worry." At first, it sounded caring. But now it felt like control. Amaka spent most days in silence, doing what was expected, being polite, being quiet, hoping Daniel would one day see her again, not just as his wife, but as a whole person. The dinner was not the first time she had been told to stay quiet. It was just the first time she decided not to. It was late afternoon. The sun had started to set, casting soft light through the kitchen window. Amaka was in the laundry room, folding clothes, when she heard Daniel's voice from the living room. He was on the phone, speaking in a low tone, but the walls were thin. "Yes, Mom," he said. "I know she's smart, but I just wish she could be a little more American." There was a long pause. Then he laughed. "Yeah, it's not just the accent. It's everything. The way she thinks, how she acts. Sometimes it's like living with a stranger." Amaka stopped folding. Her hands trembled slightly. She stood still, listening, even though she already knew she shouldn't hear more. "I'm doing my best," Daniel continued. "She just doesn't change. She holds on to all that African stuff." She didn't move. Her heart felt heavy, like something was pressing down on it. She quietly turned and walked back into the hallway before he noticed. Later that day, while cleaning out the guest room closet, Amaka found an old folder. She opened it and saw papers from her university days, notes, articles, a few printed photos. Then a flyer fell out and floated to the floor. She picked it up. It was a poster from an international student event back in grad school. Her name was printed in bold at the bottom. Keynote speaker, Amaka Akanum. Topic, Voice is Power. Speaking from where I come from. She remembered that day clearly. The room had been full. She had worn a long green dress. She spoke about identity, culture, and the strength of speaking truth, even when people didn't want to hear it. After her speech, people had come up to her with tears in their eyes. One professor hugged her. She sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the flyer in both hands. Her chest was tight, but not with sadness, with anger. That night, after dinner, she waited until Daniel was scrolling through his phone on the couch. "I heard what you said," she said quietly. He looked up. "What?" "Earlier. On the phone. You said you wish I could be more American." Daniel rolled his eyes. "Are we really doing this?" "I wasn't trying to listen," she said. "But I heard you. You said I'm like a stranger." He sighed and set his phone down. "You're being too sensitive again. You always twist things." She blinked. "I'm not twisting anything. I was just venting." "It wasn't serious," he said. "It's hard to talk to you sometimes because everything becomes a big issue." Amaka didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stared at him, not crying, not shouting. Daniel stood up and walked toward the kitchen. "Honestly, I don't know what you want from me. I'm tired." She nodded slowly. Then she stood, walked past him without a word, and went to bed. In the morning, the sky was gray. Daniel had already left for work. The house was quiet. Amaka sat at the dining table, holding her phone. She scrolled through old contacts until she found the name. Dr. Kelvin I.B. She hadn't spoken to him in a long time. They were friends in university. He had always supported her, always said she had a powerful mind. He was kind, calm, safe. She typed slowly. "Hi, Kelvin. This is Amaka. I don't know if you still have my number. I need to talk. Are you free this week?" She stared at the message for a moment, then hit send. She leaned back in the chair and let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Kelvin replied to her message that same day. "Of course I remember you, Amaka. I'm proud of you for reaching out. Let's meet soon." They met at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. Amaka wore a simple coat and sunglasses, not because she needed to hide, but because it made her feel protected. Kelvin hadn't changed much. He still had the same calm smile, the same gentle voice. He listened without interrupting. She told him about the dinner, the phone call, the silence she had been living in. "I just feel invisible," she said, eyes low. "You're not invisible," Kelvin replied. "You've just been taught to hide." They started meeting once a week, sometimes in the cafe, sometimes at the park. It wasn't romantic. It was something else. Something healing. Kelvin gave her simple tools, breathing exercises, writing prompts, reminders of who she used to be. He said, "You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you were." Amaka signed up for an online course to renew her professional certification in counseling. She didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. It was hers. A quiet flame she wanted to protect. Over the next few weeks, something began to change. She started walking straighter. She began wearing her bold-colored blouses again. She started cooking Nigerian food for herself, pepper soup, egusi, fried plantain, and humming old songs from home while stirring the pot. Daniel noticed. One night he asked, "Where have you been going after work?" "Just out," she said, not looking up. "With who?" "Just someone I trust." Daniel laughed, but it wasn't funny. "You're being dramatic." Amaka didn't respond. He tried other ways. Flowers. Sudden hugs. Then silence. Then shouting. "You don't even act like my wife anymore," he snapped one. She looked him in the eye. "Maybe your version of a wife was never real." That shut him up. As weeks passed, she grew stronger. She took more classes. She spoke up in meetings at work. She even helped a younger woman in the office who was going through something similar. She started coming home late, not because she was avoiding Daniel, but because she was finally living again. She wore red lipstick one day and smiled when she saw her reflection. She had missed that woman. At a small family gathering, Chloe noticed the change. "Well," Chloe said with a sweet but sharp smile, "still playing housewife, huh? Or are you trying out a new role now?" Amaka smiled calmly. "I've always had many roles. You just never looked close enough." Chloe blinked, caught off guard. Daniel became more distant, then more controlling. He checked her phone one night while she was asleep. Saw the messages from Kelvin. When she woke up, he confronted her. "Are you cheating on me?" "No," she said. "Then why are you seeing another man behind my back?" "Because he listens." Daniel stared at her, shocked. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said the truth, softly, like it had been waiting a long time. Then Joan called. "We're having a family dinner next weekend," she said. "Everyone will be there. You too, I hope." Amaka paused. "Yes," she said. "I'll be there." Daniel looked surprised when she told him. "You want to go?" She nodded. "Yes. I think I need to." She picked out her outfit days in advance, a long, green dress like the one she wore at her old speech. She braided her hair the way her mother used to. On the morning of the dinner, she stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself for a long time. She didn't feel afraid. Not anymore. The dinner looked almost the same as the last one. Same long table. Same sparkling glasses. Same perfect dishes lined up like a magazine photo. Joan sat at the head of the table in her usual spot. Chloe wore too much perfume. Daniel looked calm on the outside, but Amaka noticed the way his eyes kept checking her face. Everyone was talking, laughing, pretending. Amaka sat quietly for a while, watching them. The old Amaka would have smiled politely and waited for it to be over. But not tonight. Joan poured herself some wine. "So, Amaka," she said with that same cold smile, "you're dressed up. Are we celebrating something?" Daniel laughed lightly. "She's been feeling herself lately. Lots of new energy." Chloe leaned forward. "I heard you're taking some classes? That's cute. It must be hard juggling that with, not working much." Amaka looked at her without blinking. She didn't answer. "Not yet." Joan raised an eyebrow. "You've been quiet again tonight." Amaka gently placed her fork down. She picked up her napkin and folded it in half. Then she looked around the table. "Tonight," she said softly, "I'll speak. And you'll listen." The room went quiet. Even the sound of glasses stopped. Daniel leaned in. "Amaka, don't start." She stood up. "I said listen." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I've sat at this table too many times, biting my tongue. Laughing when you mocked me. Shrinking myself, so I wouldn't make any of you uncomfortable." No one moved. Chloe looked confused. Joan stiffened. "Daniel," Amaka said, turning to him, "you fell in love with a woman who had fire in her voice. And slowly, you tried to put that fire out. You didn't want a wife. You wanted a quiet shadow you could shape." Daniel opened his mouth, but Amaka kept going. "Every time I made myself smaller to fit into your world, I lost a part of me. And you watched it happen. You let it happen." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small sealed envelope. She placed it in front of Daniel. "My resignation," she said. "From the business. From the marriage." Daniel's eyes widened. "You're leaving?" "Yes." She turned to Joan. "And you," she said. "You tried to dress your insults in manners. You made me feel like I was lucky to sit at this table. Like I was less. But I was never less." Joan sat frozen, lips tight. "I am not less because I sound different, or cook different, or come from somewhere else. I am not less because I remember who I am." Then she turned to Chloe. "And you should think carefully before you laugh at things you don't understand. Because one day, someone might laugh at you too." Amaka looked around the room one last time. Her voice softened. "I stayed silent because I wanted peace. But silence without respect is not peace. It's control. And I'm done being controlled. She picked up her coat slowly, calmly, walked to the door. Daniel stood up, panicked. Amaka, wait. We can talk about this. She looked at him. You had many chances to listen. Now you'll sit in the silence you created. She opened the door. No one followed her. She walked out into the night, free. Amaka moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't big or fancy, but it felt like hers. The walls were white, the windows wide. She bought bright curtains, yellow and orange, like the ones her mother had at home in Enugu. For the first time in a long time, she woke up and didn't feel like a stranger in her own life. With Dr. Kelvin's help, she started something new, a small women's empowerment circle. They met once a week at a community center. Some were immigrants like her. Others were women who had been silenced in different ways. They came to share stories, drink tea, and learn how to speak again. Amaka didn't teach them how to be loud. She taught them how to be whole. She also returned to her first love, psychology. She finished the certification course and applied for a license. She passed. A few months later, she started seeing clients, mostly women, who were learning to heal. Some cried in her office. Some just sat in silence. Amaka understood both. She didn't rush anyone. She knew how long it could take to find your voice again. Her days were full, but peaceful. She walked to work, cooked for herself, played music in the evenings. She laughed more, even when she was alone. She smiled at strangers in the grocery store. She didn't need permission to exist anymore. Daniel sent flowers once, then a letter, then a box with their wedding photos. He left voice messages too. I made mistakes, he said. I didn't see it then. I do now. Please come home. Amaka never replied. She didn't hate him, but she wasn't going back to a place that had once asked her to disappear. One evening, Kelvin invited her to speak at a community event. She almost said no. Then she remembered the flyer from her university days, the one where she gave a speech that made people cry. She wore her green dress again, stepped onto the small stage. The lights were soft. The chairs were full. She took a deep breath. My name is Amaka, she said. And for a long time I was quiet. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I was made to believe my voice didn't belong. She looked at the crowd. Some nodded. Some closed their eyes. I'm here today, not as someone who has all the answers. I'm here as someone who found her way back. And then she began to read her old speech. Her voice was clear, calm, and proud. No one interrupted. No one laughed. When she finished, it was a cool evening, months after everything had changed. Amaka walked down a quiet street, carrying a small bag of groceries. The city lights shimmered gently. Her steps were calm. Her mind was clear. She passed a restaurant window and paused. It was the same place where Daniel's family once had that dinner. The same long windows, the same white tablecloths, the same soft music playing inside. She almost walked past, but then she heard laughter. Sharp, uncomfortable laughter. She turned her head and looked inside. At a corner table, a young woman sat with 3 others. She was dressed neatly, her hair braided tight, her eyes full of worry. Amaka could hear her voice, soft, polite, with a Nigerian accent. She had just said something, and the others were laughing. One of them said, Sorry, what was that? Say it again, but slower. Another chuckled. You're adorable. I love how your voice sounds like a movie. The woman smiled, but it was the kind of smile Amaka knew well. One that didn't reach the eyes. One made of fear and politeness. Amaka didn't think twice. She pushed open the door and walked in. The hostess greeted her, but Amaka gently waved her off and walked toward the table. The group looked up, surprised. Sorry to interrupt, Amaka said, her voice calm but firm. She looked at the woman. Hi, she said kindly. Can I sit with you for a moment? The woman nodded, confused but curious. Amaka pulled out a chair and sat beside her. She looked at the others at the table, then back at the woman. They laughed at me once too, Amaka said softly. Because of how I spoke. Because of where I came from. The woman's eyes widened just slightly. Amaka smiled. Speak anyway. For a long second, the table was silent. The others looked uncomfortable, unsure. But the woman beside Amaka slowly sat up straighter. Her smile changed. It was real now. Warm. She turned and spoke again. Her voice was steady, her words full. And this time no one laughed. Amaka stood, gently touched the woman's shoulder, and walked out. She didn't look back. The street felt quiet again. The air was soft. She kept walking, one step at a time. Free. Fade to black. Hey besties. Thanks so much for watching till the end. If you loved Amaka's journey from silence to strength, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful, drama-filled stories. Up next, her friends invited everyone except her to their girls' trip, so she booked one seat beside. Don't miss it. Bye for now. #SpokenAnyway, #Herstory, #DramaUnfold.